Hey everyone, this is MECHA TFT. Wanted to go over some of the comps I think will be staples and double up this set. I'm a multi-set double up challenger. I'm usually joined by a couple other the folks I play double up with, but today I'll just go through some of the solo. I do want to just run through kind of the set mechanic first before I go into the 5 comps. Essentially, it's kind of reminiscent a little bit of my favorite set, Hero Augments, but a little dialed down. It's essentially what I'm going to call anomalies done right. So on 1-3 and 3-6, you will get a Poro SNAX. It's this little white one down below. And essentially, this is a power-up for your champ. So here's an example. You can put it on a unit, and you'll see you get to pick from 3 options. Maybe one's gain 4.5% damage amp per player level. At level 10, gain an additional 35%. You'll also get one of these Poro removal SNAX every PvE round. I have PvE there. I've been playing PvE, but so you can actually remove it from a champion, or if you sell the champ, you get the SNAX back at no cost. So you have no problem to slam it early. It kind of just builds on basic TFT fundamentals. Hey, this is my strongest unit. Here's what my item slams are. I'm going to put a SNAX on that unit for now. There's really no downside to doing that. You can either sell or remove the SNAX later, which is really nice. It doesn't feel super restrictive. One important thing to know, you get one at 1-3, so before the first combat, and then you get one on 3-6, meaning the last fight on stage 3 before minions. There are certain SNAX and power-ups, whatever you want to call them, certain SNAX power-ups that are not available after stage 3, so you can kind of, once you learn which ones you want, you can kind of use your SNAX, early or later, depending on what you want to hit. Some are only available on stage 2, like this example one. It's max stage 3. Meaning in order for this to show up on the champs that can even receive it, you have to put the SNAX on them by stage 3, so stage 2. I'll go through essentially, this is sort of just like a carrier generic power-up one. This goes on a wide variety of champs. But one cool thing, there's also trait-specific ones. So this one is called Mech Pilot. There is a trait called the Mighty Mech. You summon a Galio who equips items. This you can actually only see on the mech units because they actually pilot the mech and give them stats, and then they eject from the mech. Pretty cool. And then one other thing to note, there are certain ones that have, this is data mined from Meta TFT, by the way. There are weights assuming that the higher the weight, the more often it'll come up. So that's what the arrow is pointing to. So like All Out on Cassante, that's his specific power-up. There's specific power-ups for each champ where they get a really cool bonus, and they feel more like a hero augment, like a dialed-down hero augment. It's really cool. Some of the one costs will like scale throughout the fight and get AP. Some, like Cassante, he'll actually start in his all-out form, which is just really cool. But then some of these, like Ordinary, is a weight of 2, so it's super rare. And there's going to be niche use cases where like you're going to actually play around. A certain SNAX if you hit it early or whatever that looks like. So I think that's pretty cool. And then lastly, one thing to show, Meta TFT does have. They are going to show a tool that's going to show, what SNAX can actually be received on a certain unit. And then you'll see below similar units. It's hard to read. Don't worry about what's actually here. The main point is they can receive certain SNAX, but then similar units can receive the SNAX. However, it's believed that this is from a shared pool, meaning if I use a SNAX on Sivir and I see a generic damage carry augment or SNAX, sorry, I'm getting words mixed up, you will not see that necessarily if you use it on Jinx. So you can use it early on Sivir to get that out of the pool and then try to hit maybe the trait-specific one you want to see on that unit. So it's going to evolve and grow as we go through, and we're going to learn how to play it a little bit. So we'll jump into the 5 comps. Sort of like I did last set, I'm pretty sure I just have 2 main verticals, 2 main rerolls, and then what I would call like a fast 8-9 comp that you can really, if you're snowballing, you can play. So starting off with essentially the 2 main verticals, because I think these are just going to be staples throughout the set. So I'm using TFT Academy's resource, but I'll kind of go into depth and explain some of this. This is 8 Star Guardian. Essentially, the Star Guardian power-up is Star Guardian units receive a buff based on what Star Guardian is out there. And then the more you have, the bigger that buff is going to be. Similar to like Guild, couple sets ago, similar to Heavenly, that kind of thing, except it's only for Star Guardians, which is kind of unique. And then one new thing to note, if you can read, it says Prismatic in the line break. They have to spend 20,000 mana. So when you actually get to the capstone of Star Guardian, you get to 8, for example, you actually have to do a task to actually unlock the Prismatic version. So you can't just get double emblems or triple emblems, on Dummy Galaxy or Wandering Trainers, and then just be able to win for free. So super interesting. The earlier you get it out, the quicker you can start building towards that prismatic trade of spending 20,000 mana. One big thing to note here, this example shows RE3. You can certainly play around RE3. You can also just fast 8, fast 9 and play, you know, Jinx and Seraphine. Essentially the main +1 here is Kaboku for Mentor Heavyweight. Mentor is essentially a splash trait that you have to play either one or all 4 Mentors to actually get a bonus, which is pretty cool. So that's just a good splash where your team's going to get 6% damage reduction. Combine that with all the Star Guardian stats, it's pretty insane. They're going to get a lot. Not to mention the main tank Poppy is a Star Guardian Heavyweight, so it's a perfect synergy. Hey, when you're looking at the Heavyweight +1 to play, there you go, you can play Poppy. Additionally, you know, you can play like another sniper with Jinx or something like that, whoever your main carry is. One interesting thing to note, it certainly helps to have Star Guardian emblem just based on what tier of the units you need to actually hit the 8. You can't get to 8 without the emblem unless you hit the Seraphine, which is pretty hard, so you get it a lot earlier if you have an emblem. One interesting thing to note, Seraphine, the 5 cost, actually is going to get essentially... Seraphine's ability will have more damage based on your team's overall stats, so it's perfect for Star Guardian. It's a combination of like your team's entire bonus stats. It's pretty cool. So yeah, that's one of the main verticals I think we'll see a lot. It's pretty decently strong right now, I would say. Another main vertical that isn't as strong right now is Battle Academia. We'll see if that comes around. Cool. Second, I want to talk about Soul Fighter. This is my favorite vertical. One thing I will say that they don't actually have on the augments on the right-hand side, I think this is going to be the quality over quantity comp. That's one thing I kind of experimented with early on in PvE. Essentially, when you're playing quality over quantity, if you think of Anime Squad from the last set, you want something that the units themselves are just getting a bunch of stats or like power from the trait itself. In this case, they're actually just getting stats from Soul Fighter, whereas Anime Squad from last set just had weapons that did damage. So you can just spread your items out, use a bunch of utility-based items like Ionic Spark and Morello, things like that. Those are all extremely broken in their Radiant version. The main thing here that's really interesting about this comp, I think, personally, is compared to Star Guardian. Star Guardian has some 1 cost, some 2 cost for sure. 2 1 cost and 1 2 cost. Where it feels like Soul Fighter, you can actually hit the breakpoints super early. So there's two 1 costs and 2 2 costs. So you can just have four Soul Fighter pretty much start of the game and then splash units for your flex slots, which makes it really powerful and very easy to play, in my opinion. Main note here is Set is your main tank and Samira is your main carry. However, late game, this comp really caps around Gwen. Now, interesting thing about Gwen that I didn't know for a while, because, you know, I can't read. She actually has 2 range, so you want to put her in the second row like this. You can use these, like, kind of utility-based items because she hits the entire board. You know, it's like plenty of units from other sets, right? Where when they hit the whole board or multiple units, you know, these kind of utility items just make more sense on them. They spread it around easier. Oops, I still have Callista in the front there. Yeah, don't do that. One thing to know, you'll probably just carry your AD items early on Callista, and you'll carry your early tank items on like a Nefiri, for example, and then Gwen items you'll just hold on Viego. You play Volibear here just for an edgelord, but late game you would certainly cap around a better edgelord like Yone. In the current meta, Yone and Gwen are just the 2 best 5 costs in the set, as well as Zyra and even kind of TF. Zyra and TF are kind of trait agnostic. Yone and Gwen don't really need their traits a whole heck of a lot, but in Soul Fighter, Gwen does go pretty nuclear. Alright, we'll move on to the rerolls. These are always pretty fun. Number 1 is going to be crew reroll. Essentially, the way this works, every time you 3-star a crew unit, you're going to get a new overall just buff. So the actual crew buff is that crew members get 5% health and attack speed for every crew member you have out. It's not super impactful. You don't need to immediately put out more and more crew units. What the really interesting thing they did, and I love this, is it's actually super based around how many of them you 3-star. So the first crew unit you 3-star, now for the rest of the game, you will get +1 XP per paid shop reroll. And crew units the odds never drop with player level, meaning if you are leveling up and you still are missing a couple shens or something, you're level 7, level 8, you'll still be able to see them at the frequency you would see them at level 6. It kind of scales up from there. If you get 2 3-stars, you start getting a free reroll every round. At 3 3-stars, so really you're looking at Sivir, Malphite, Shen, you're going to start getting essentially Boombot-esque damage. So when you do 280 damage, it's going to fire a rocket dealing 105, and you can kind of do the math on what that is. That's effectively damage amp. So what did I say? 208 and 105. Okay. Yeah, so it's... Yeah, so you're essentially now getting 37.5% damage amp. Okay, one other thing to note about this comp, you kind of can play around a couple different variations. Obviously, you're going to play around Sivir and Malphite early, so you just slam these items and forget it. Obviously, reroll traits, reroll augments, are really good. There's even new ones like Treasure Hunt, where you get a locked chest that unlocks when you spend 20 gold on rerolls. That's amazing for this comp, as you can imagine. But eventually, you're going to try to 3-star everything, right? So, like, Ziggs can hold your AP items. Late game, you can try to play around TF. It's a little more difficult. He has a very niche build that you may or may not be holding on other units, but in this case, you're going to play around just more strategists. And Janna is a strategist protector. Malphite's a protector, so that fits in well. Ziggs is a strategist, so you're just going to stack strategists, which is essentially frontline units get a shield, backline units get damage amp. All right, we'll move on to what is one of my most enjoyed rerolls. There's actually kind of 2 different versions. You can either play Kog'Maw or you can play around Smolder. It's just going to be whoever's stronger. I think Kog'Maw can be stronger with artifacts, and Smolder is just generally stronger, without any special interactions. So why am I saying Smolder and Kog'Maw? So they're actually the same unit, as well as Rammus. So there is a unit in this set called Lulu. Lulu is a monster trainer. When you put Lulu out, you get to pick between 3 units. It's sort of like a threat unit, meaning they don't actually have a trait. Like, they're not like a sniper. They're not like a duelist. They are just a monster. Now, the monster actually scales with XP as they get kills and you win fights, and they get power-ups as you level up. So if you get an early Lulu and you have good item slams, you can play around it, level up your dragon earlier. This is sort of how to train your dragon. You're effectively going to reroll on 7 because it's a 3 cost, meaning it's a perfect comp to fit a 6-piece frontline in. In this case, Juggernaut is kind of the strongest 6-piece right now. It is believed, at least. But I've also seen people play around 6 Bastion with this. I've seen, things like 6 Heavyweight, although that seems a little undertuned right now. But yeah, I think it's a really cool reroll. You're going to want, really Shojin and IE, and then the last item can be Flex. Striker's Flail is just the best because you get crit damage giving you amp. You can roll for Udyr 3 on 7. However, Udyr's played in a ton of comps because his trait web is just a little too good. So it's sometimes hard to 3-star him. You're essentially going to try to hit an early set and play around that as your main tank. But yeah, this comp is super fun. Smolder's really fun. Smolder also has burn built into the kit. There is wound. However, here you can see TFT Academy does still include a Sunfire, just to make sure that it is active the whole time for like Bruiser-esque units. However, I think more to follow on how that exactly is going to work out as the set develops. Okay, and then lastly, I want to talk about another one of my favorite comps in the current meta. I think this is going to be a staple in some capacity. Essentially, the main point here is for Mentor. So Mentor is like Emissary from a couple sets ago. I guess it was the Arcane set, yeah. So Mentor, you have to play either 1 or 4. If you play 2 or 3, the bonuses are not they're not active. However, if you get to all 4, your actual Mentor units all upgrade. In some way their ability upgrades. I know Rises just does a shitload more damage, plain and simple. One interesting thing to note, in this version you're playing around 5 Mighty Mech. That is really just because Yone late game is just an absolute monster, and it pairs well with his Wind Brother Yasuo, who's also an edgelord, so you get a free 2 edgelord out there. Then there's a lot of other synergies, so things like Jarvan is a strategist, which Ryze is also a strategist, so there's just a lot of really good overlap here. Aatrox is a Juggernaut heavyweight, which fits, you know, perfectly with Udyr and Kaboku, so it just seems to be the most stable way to play for Mentor. However, I am seeing a lot late game where you're actually just dropping potentially even super late game the other mentors other than maybe Ryze, and you're playing just full legendaries. So thing like Braum, Gwen, Braum, Gwen, and then you'd add like a Xin Zhao or something like that to fit the trait. So Jarvan's your main tank. He's going to jump in and stun the largest clump of enemies. There's going to be positioning based around Jarvan that's going to develop as the set goes on. Yone is just an absolute demon. With your 2 SNAX, you know, ideally you're going to put one on Ryze, one on Yone. Super late game, you can move some Ryze items to like a Gwen and actually drop either some of these mechs or you can drop, you know, even like I said, the 3-piece mentor, Kaboku, Yasuo, and Udyr, and then add just 3 legendaries to fill this slot, and then you can drop, Lucian, Karma, and adjust that way. So yeah, the board's super flexible. One interesting thing to note, and the reason I love this comp so much, when you're at 2 and 3 mentor, aka before you hit Ryze, so here's the 4-piece mentor, you have to essentially pick one to play around and build out that trait web first. So let's say you have a 2-star Kaboku and he's tanking. You're going to play like heavyweight in that case, right? Instead of these mentors, you're going to hold the mentors on the bench. Udyr's probably the best one to actually get early and play around because he just has an incredible trait web. Juggernaut, Duelist. You can easily play around Duelist backline and Juggernaut frontline. Duelist holding some variation of your Yone items. And then some backliner holding your AP items, whatever that looks like. Yeah, this comp's super fun, really powerful. You're sometimes stable on 1 cost, which is interesting. I think it might be a little too powerful, but essentially this is like a strat amp type of comp where you have to be a good enough player to decide at level 8, am I strong enough to go 9, or what should I do from here, if I should keep rolling for something like Ryze 2, or maybe I have 2-star Yasuo and he can hold my Yone items, and then I can go 9 from there and look for the Yone. I think you're going to see a lot of high-level players really flexing around this comp, and it's going to be really fun to watch from a competitive standpoint, in tournaments and things like that. So great. Well, I think that's all 5 comps I wanted to go through. I'm sorry if this wasn't necessarily the most informative video I've ever had. Obviously, it's the new set, so there's so much that is to be learned. I didn't want to overstep my boundaries, and I did kind of use TFT Academy's build-outs just because, Dish Soap is, the GOAT, him and Title, so they know how to play TFT. I think in Double Up, these comps especially are going to be super good because, having a second person to find your key units early for you and help you build these boards is going to be amazing. For example, in the vertical traits, obviously finding the 4 costs earlier, or if your partner does, you just have 2 shops to do it now. In the rerolls, you have 2 shops to hit your units from, essentially. And then in the Fast 9, again, you could send gifts like 5-10, 5 costs and 10 gold, or in short 5-10, and then that can spike your board as well. So I think these are going to be main 5 staples that are going to be around. There's a ton of other comps. There's so much to learn. Super jazzed up about this set. I hope this video was useful. And until next time, I'll try to get uploading more of these every patch. Peace.